Hey, I'm actually early today, 2 minutes, I think, for a little live stream. Out the window there is lovely Salt Lake City. And yeah, we're here on a day off, and then we play here tomorrow. I am out on the Five for Fighting Vertical Horizon, 100 Years of Everything You Want, is I think what the official tour is actually called. Tour 2025. It's a short 2-week run. I think 8 shows. Pretty sure that's it. And I put up a little video the other day, which was my first YouTube short in a while. I've been somewhat lazy, I'll admit, putting up new stuff and getting videos out and stuff. And I just thought, well, here I am on stage. It's bright out. There's no noise going on stage. I'll make a 1.5 minutes, the shortest little rig rundown video ever, and post it as a short, which I did. And some of the comments were just hilarious, and it's actually getting a lot of views. Like it's almost up to 40K in just a couple days, which for me is really good on a short. So and so some of the comments are great. Like, it's like, as Tim Pierce says in all of his infinite wisdom, even when they're kind of trolly or whatever, or negative, there's always a shred of truth. And so, like, one of them, I think, was probably my favorite, was boring. So, I wanted to kind of address the rig and why I'm using what I'm using on this tour. And so let's start with the fact that I'm using a lot of rented stuff. Because the whole topic of this is the reality of, different tours. I'm doing 4 tours this year, by the way, 4 different tours. And I want to talk about the reality of different touring and why you make these decisions sometimes, and just to sort of shed a little bit of light on why I would come out here with almost none of my own stuff and use a lot of rented stuff out of Nashville. So, but I'm already digressing. So let's kind of get to it. Yeah. So somebody here said, "Why are you renting all that gear instead of using your own?" And I'm just reading right off the YouTube comments off the video. So here's the thing, is that tours and what I use and what all the different musicians use that are involved are, primarily the number one thing that's going to dictate what you can do, no matter what you want to do, is the budget. And when you're only playing 8 shows, and when those 8 shows start somewhere other than the city you're originating in, we're all based in LA in this band. And when they end in a city that you're not from, how are you going to get all the equipment from A to B, out to your first show, back from the last show, home? And what is that going to cost, right? Everybody talks about the realities of touring these days, how expensive it is, travel, fuel costs, just everything's expensive these days. So imagine what it costs to put a whole bunch of gear on a truck in Los Angeles and get it all the way to Ohio, which is where our first day was, right? First date. And truck it all the way out there. We end in Seattle in about 4 days. And imagine what it would cost to put that gear on a truck and drive it all the way back to LA. Because here's the other thing, is that the bus on our tour originated in the middle of the country. I believe Senator coaches, I think they're based in Alabama. I think they keep their buses there, which is not that far from Nashville, really. So I believe what happened is the bus left from Alabama, drove up through Nashville. There's an SIR, Studio Instrument Rentals, famous, equipment rental place in Nashville. And a bunch of rental gear was picked up there, and then the bus continued on to Ohio. It's not very far, really, in the context of driving a bus with a trailer to get it from Alabama all the way up to Ohio, just kind of straight north jaunt. Now, imagine if that bus had to leave Alabama and go all the way to LA with a trailer on it. Trailer's rented too. Bus costs you money. The trailer costs you money. Gas costs you money. The driver costs you money. How long would it take to get from Alabama all the way to LA with that trailer? Pick up some gear, right? Drive all the way to Ohio now. It's an extra 4 days journey, probably, at minimum. Buses, back when I knew about this stuff, were about $1,000 a day if they were a good deal. And imagine what the diesel costs for a tour bus, right? And imagine what the driver costs. So it's the reality of of the budget and the costs that sometimes dictate these things. So sometimes you're faced with, oh, we're not going to take gear from LA. That's not going to happen. Many times we do on Five for Fighting tours, but not this time. And you're faced with, guys, we're flying out of LA. We're not trucking anything out of LA. The bus is not leaving out of LA. We're going to fly out to the first gig. Costs way less to rent what we need backline wise, almost like a fly date from a rental company, in this case out of Nashville. So let's go that route. So now you're going to go to the airport with whatever you can bring. And if you really want to get crazy, you can bring a lot of stuff and start checking in extra bags and stuff. But I was one bag over the other day, and I've even got status on the airline I'm on. And to check an extra bag was $150, right? Which they'll pay for, but they don't want to. You know, the tour doesn't want to go out of a pocket as much as possible. And I don't really want to be out that $150 either, and then need to get reimbursed like a month later after I get off the road and wait to get paid and everything like that, invoice, right? So I'm out for that $150 already. So if I would have shown up with an amp head and another pedal board and whatever else I'd bring, you know, an extra guitar, then how much would I have been out? You know, $450 or something every time you had an extra bag, you know, right? So these are all the concerns. Now, let's contrast that with the other tours that I'm doing this year. First tour I did this year, Classic Rock Show. That is 30 to 40 shows usually. This is an 8-show tour, the 2 weeks that I'm on right now. 30 to 40 shows over a span of 2 months. Do you want to rent gear that whole time? What would that cost, right? It's going to be way more, right? To, you know, obviously than this tour, for even just renting what I have out here, because you're paying every day for a cabinet and for power amps and for whatever else I would have, you know. So at some point, and then it's also like, what kind of show is it? Like, you're trying to put on a different kind of show where it's like a classic rock show, and it's like, I sort of make the, yeah, I could do it with a modeler if I had to. Is that really in the spirit of the classic rock show? Not really, right? You know, so I'm about like, yeah, tube amps and 412 cabinets and real amp heads. When I started doing that tour, I was using, I think, the PT-15 and a 212 on stage. That was it. And then I quickly went, now I'm at 2 PT-100s and 2 412s and a mess of guitars. I still try and not bring too many guitars, but I got at least 6 out there, maybe 7, you know, when I do it. And at some point, we realized that it became maybe more cost effective, and I have enough equipment where I could leave some stuff there. So I've got gear now that lives in Europe, 2 412s, 3 PT-100s at this point that are all over in Europe. So and a bunch of my guitars have stayed over there this year as well. So when I go there, that stuff's all there now. They've paid for it, and it ain't cheap to get it over there the first time around. But if they can get a couple tours out of it, or 3 tours out of it before I maybe need some stuff back, or 4, who knows how long that stuff stays there, you know, then it starts to become more cost effective. So that's why PT-100s, 412s, all that stuff over there, it's just a different kind of tour in a different sort of spirit. Right after the Classic Rock Show this year, which was UK and Europe, I went and did Sat Fi. And they were asking me about equipment. What are we going to do? Do we rent? What do we, you know, like, what are the options? I'm like, hey, it's a European tour. I've got gear in Europe. They're like, oh, fantastic. All that needs to be done is get it from one city to another, down to London, which was where we were rehearsing. And that's the same stuff that I used for the for the Sat Fi tour. So all that gear living in Europe, same gear really. I brought I had to bring some different guitars. So I got a couple of double guitar cases, and there was a small run of cargo that went over for me. Pedal boards in Pelican cases, 2 Pelican cases, and 2 double guitar cases. That's what I sent over there. 4 guitars total. So I used a Gator. More on this, I'm going to make a video about these Gator cases soon, but I've got a Gator double guitar case that went cargo, as well as an Enki. So I guess I sent 4 guitars, 2 Pelican cases. That was the extent of what went over there. Everything else was already there. That was real convenient, and ended up saving them money for sure in the Sat Fi camp. And so, you know, you end up touring Europe a lot when you do what I do. I'm going to be back there January, February doing Classic Rock Show again. So that gear's all still there. It's great. I can use that, and, you know, and there's no cost then. Now on this tour, I'm going to take some questions here and talk about some other comments in a minute, but I'm just trying to spell out my year for you here. We get to this tour. It started 2 weeks after I got back from Satriani. So I don't, because my gear is so spread out in Europe, and then some stuff, those Enki that I just mentioned, and the dual guitar Gator coming back from Europe, back over to the States, they arrived the day after I had to leave on this. I've only got so many cases. I've got a lot of equipment in LA and things that I can use, but I've only got so many cases. So it was like, how am I even going to get, 1 or 2 guitars out for this? So it was that also dictated, maybe I just don't even bring a second guitar of my own on this. I use a rented guitar as my backup, because in Five for Fighting, I can play one guitar for almost the entire show, except for acoustic songs and except for one song that I need to play slide in a open tuning on. So that's why, hence the rented Fender Strat. I didn't even want to deal with I don't have another molded case in LA. Everything's gone. Everything's over. There's 6 guitars over in Europe, 2 double guitar cases. Like, I've only got so many flight cases, and everything was out. So I've got this great sort of like a hard shell meets soft shell case that I feel pretty good about flying. It's as good as a standard guitar case anyway. And I used that to fly my main Five for Fighting Sir out here on this tour, and checked it in baggage, and it was just fine. It was cool. And I thought, I'm just going to bring that guitar and do the quad Cortex rig. Now, that's probably enough. But I should take some individual questions and stuff like that from you guys there in the chat, because I haven't even been looking at the chat. But that's long story short, kind of what's going on up till this point in the year. I've got more coming up later in this year, Japan, and that's a whole nother scenario that I've been able to come up with a way, because that would be also a quad Cortex or rental situation, because of budget and because of concerns like that. But basically, I'm going to fly over with minimal stuff. But I believe we've got it figured out so that I've got 2 412s, 2 PT100s over there for the 7 shows that I'm doing over there in a little bit. And I will fly those the Enki and the Gator. I'll have ready to go with some guitars. So I think I'll bring 4 guitars over there, and I'll have a Pelican with pedal board, some cables and stuff like that in it. That'll go over there. And the 412s and the heads will be there. Anything else I'll have to rent. Probably acoustics will be rented, things like that. So another comment was like, well, I guess that's it for you for tube amps and analog stuff, because I showed using quad Cortex. Like, no, I'm actually doing 4 tours this year. 3 of them are tube amps and cabinets, and one of them I'm using a modeler on. And and so no, by no means. I just do whatever it takes to do the job. Somebody else said, and I couldn't find the comment here, but they said something about like, what's with all the rental stuff? I thought that was like a no-go for like professionals. Like, it's like, actually, no, the opposite is true. When you're a pro guitar player, and you guys know this, if you're pros, these days, it's all about whatever it's going to take to make it work within the budget, which might mean using rentals. You might not have any of your stuff. It might be like, we don't want to pay an XX bag fee for a guitar, or, it's because of a scheduling thing or whatever. You might have to fly out and play on all rented stuff. If you go and watch the video of the 2014 Sir NAMM show party gig where I'm playing with Ian Thornley, and we do some big rec tunes. Ian plays, we do Control, we do Blowing Wide Open, a bunch of songs. And you can see those videos, they're on YouTube, of Ian and I playing together. Ian is playing none of his own gear in that video. He's using a borrowed Sir Classic that he tried that day for the first time. He's using a PT100 old school one, like the old model, the CAE style one. He's using a paddle board that the Sir guys put together with, I think, a delay that I brought for him, maybe a Shiba drive, a compressor, a couple different pedals on it that they put together. He brought nothing to play that show. And watch him play guitar and listen to him in those videos. Watch him play. Those videos have great, they've got like at least a couple 100,000 views each. Watch how he plays and sings, and tell me if you sense that he's not, does it seem unprofessional? He's such a professional that he sings like a bird, plays unbelievable, and none of it is his own equipment. He showed up with nothing, and sometimes that's what you got to do, So All right. Let's take a look at a couple of the comments here, and let's try and keep it about. I'm only going to kind of address the comments about touring and about gear. So I'm going to look through some of them here because I want to keep this on topic and not have it be kind of a random live stream. So let's see here. Here's Philip says, I have a friend, not a pro, but a good local player in local bands who had to backline stuff. And if you don't do it regularly, it's harder than you'd think. Yeah, I mean, you have to be accustomed to it and know what works. And you start to, when I started doing it 25 years ago or whatever, and I started getting gigs where I had to backline things a lot, you start to realize what backline companies normally have, which isn't the PT100. Some of them will, but it's like you start to realize that, okay, every backline company has a Marshall DSL 50 or a DSL 100. So maybe I should get to know that amp. And I actually had one back then. I was like, I'm just going to make this my default amp right now. This was around 2000, 2001. I'm going to make this my default amp, get to know it, and try almost like the Tom Morello method of like, this is what I've got. Let's turn the knobs and make it sound as good as I can. Okay, that'll have to do. That's my sound with a few simple pedals. That was kind of my approach back then with it. Was, this was before the days really of digital modelers and stuff became, and I thought every backline company will have one of these. Now, even then, it was like I used to like, specify Marshall DSL 100 and what would show up a JCM 900 sometimes. It was never quite as, didn't like the sound of them and stuff, but you made it work, and that's what you, because maybe you flew out with one guitar. I remember having a fight with an artist back then, like literally like not a fight, physical fight, but like an argument that, just a dispute over like I flew out some gear and I ended up with an excess bag fee. And it was to do a festival somewhere in the middle of the country for like thousands of people. It was a big open air. I remember the Beach Boys were playing. We were playing, but some artists that'll go unnamed that I was playing with. And I had a $75 excess bag fee for bringing just the bare minimum. I had to rent an amp there and everything, but I had, I think, my pedal board, and I got one excess bag fee, and I couldn't get this artist to reimburse me. And finally, one of the something that I'll suggest to you here is you don't generally talk to artists about money. You talk to the management, tour manager, or sometimes the band manager about money. Generally, when you're trying to get paid for things, don't bring that to the artist. That's what they pay a manager to do, is deal with stuff like that. And you don't want to have direct. But this ended up being like where the manager said, look, they don't want to pay you. And I said, what do you mean? Like, I was playing your show. I had to bring like the bare minimum of that. Well, they don't want to pay you. And it wasn't like a great paying gig anyway. And I had to call the artist and go, what's this about? Like how you don't want to reimburse me for that bag fee? Well, what did you have the excess bag fee for? And I'm like, my pedal board that has your sounds programmed in it for the gig. If you want the sounds, I can show up and just play through a dry amp, or did you want it to sound like, there was channel switching and a clean sound and a dirty sound and some chorus on this sound and a delay? Do you like the sounds? Because originally you hired me because you liked, how I played and the tones, and the guy goes, all right, you win this time. It's one of the last gigs I ever did with them, but that's the world that I live in, that's the reality that I live in, and, but anyways, yeah, getting used to the backline thing, it's crazy. So let's answer some more questions about the realities of and the fun stuff that happens on tour. How many packs of strings do you need to bring for a good sized tour? So generally I'll try and look at how many guitars I have and how many songs I play them on, because some guitars only get like a song or two of use. So like on the Satriani tour, for instance, I had a nylon string out to play Flying in a Blue Dream. That's the only song I used it on. How many times do you have to change strings on tour? Maybe a couple. It gets one song of play like every day, or 5 times a week. You get a couple of days off a week. Don't got to change the strings that much. Even so, humid summertime touring, strings get dead and all that stuff, even with sweaty. So I think I brought 5 packs of Ernie ball end, the kind of the cheesy ones, but they work great. Not, I say cheesy because they're not the traditional tie the thing around the bridge, type of nylon strings. But they're great. Ernie Balls, never had a problem with them. Man, that guitar, and also my tech, Michael, I got to give him kudos, because boy, could he tune. Flying in a Blue Dream is kind of a drop. It's like an open C kind of tuning. Imagine a nylon string tuned way down. It's like wow. And it was that great Godin nylon string that I had was terrific. The Ernie Ball strings every night, no problems. But I only brought 5 sets out for that. Now my main sets were the Paradigm 9s from Ernie Ball. On my main guitar, I have a Sir PT standard HSS. That was my main guitar on the. It just became the kind of the main instrument that I played on about 80% of the show. That guitar, I actually don't know how often Michael changed the strings. I'm going to say every 3 shows, something like that, that he would probably change the strings. They're the Paradigms. They're supposed to be anti-breakage, good strings. I never broke a string all tour. Knock on wood, I hate breaking strings, but I didn't break one string on the whole Satriani tour, which was just great. So kudos to Ernie Ball, and it's awesome. But, sort of factor in that I had 5 guitars out there, one main one. My Floyd Rose would PT Custom would get some abuse every night on the encore. How many sets of strings do you need if you want to change them every 3 shows or so? That's kind of the math I would do. So generally on something like that, I'd maybe bring 36 sets of 9s. You'd end up with 10 left over, that you wouldn't end up using, that kind of thing. Yeah. Do you have to pay to store your gear in Europe? Yeah, sure, but that's not something that I. That's kind of a classic rock show thing, because they've got a big storage lockup that they use, and there's enough space in there to do that, and it's a heck of a lot more reasonable for them to do that rather than send it back and forth every time. Like imagine sending it overseas every time. 412s. Imagine shipping a 412 from Europe to the States and back again. Just that is it's crazy, right? I had to do it a couple of years ago. I had to get some gear back from Japan. Couple of amps, couple of cabinets from Japan. The bill was about $1,500 for freight, and that's I think a good deal, So send a whole band's gear back and forth. It can be I remember with Chris Cornell, they bought a whole separate B rig for Europe because we were going to three times in 1 year. We went to Europe for 3 different tours. We were touring a lot, 2007. And they figured out that it was cheaper to buy the band a whole nother rig and keep it in Europe than it was to ship the gear back and forth 3 times. So they spent about $50K, I think, because it was $50K every trip to go back and forth for all that gear, drums and, console and everything that they were sending. It was a different time in touring where it was nowadays there's these different realities of people using things like Kempers or where they would be yeah, we're not taking all that stuff. Even Metallica's gone that way, right? That's why. I mean, they had to go to Antarctica and play that show, and they're we can't bring Mesa Boogies or whatever to whatever they're using to Antarctica. They did it on fractals, and they went, wait a minute, the light bulb went off, and then they started using those, and then everybody complains about, what I mean? I wish they were on amps and all that stuff. But the reality is they looked at the, they're like, well, it worked. We did it, and that's what happens a lot of times. So here's some other comments from just online. From the comment section of the video, the rig rundown video. Not supposed to say that. Premier Guitar's got that trademark, but we'll call it a rig run through. How about that? Quad Cortex is having a moment, says Andy. It seems to be the preferred modeler. This is really funny because somebody else said, why haven't you looked at using an FM3 or FM9? Because the Quad Cortex isn't the preferred modeler. YouTube comments are awesome. But so it seems to be the preferred modeler these days. I mean, the reality is it's like driving a BMW or Mercedes or a Lexus or a nice Toyota or a nice, they're all quality rides that get you from A to B. And it's just whichever one you bond with. So why the Quad Cortex for me? I like using captures. And I like having all the effects in the unit. And I like the way that the preset management is. And then the new editor, and then I can plug it in, come up with set lists easily. The workflow, the quality of sound, ease of use. I mean, something like mapping an expression pedal, something like calibrating an expression pedal. These are things that I've never had to open a manual for on a Quad Cortex. I can just figure it out on the unit itself by going, well, it's probably like this. Oh yeah, that's how it works. Okay. And that to me is golden. I love it. But also the sound quality. I mean, some people would argue, in the world of captures, it's like everybody raves about the open source, NAM or whatever it's called. It's the best, better than Quad Cortex, better than this, or the Tone X is slightly better than the Quad Cortex, or some people think that whatever. You know what I mean? The reality is, I get great captures on the Quad. Good enough for me. They sound a lot like the amp that I put into it, which was a Top Hat King Royale. So that's the reason why the quad too for me. When I used to play with Five for Fighting back in 2001, I used an amp called the King Royale from Top Hat, which was basically an AC30. And I used it on one setting with a few pedals and added, delay and other, overdrive, whatever I wanted to add going into the King. That was my rig back then. It always sounded great. I've still got recordings from those days. I'm like, man, I love that tone. So when I started doing this tour again in 2022, and some of the first stuff we had to do was fly dates, kind of equivalent to it. Because this whole tour right now, the 8-day tour is basically like a fly date, right? Getting dictated. We got to fly out and rent stuff. It's the same. So that was the first gigs we were doing back when I started doing this back in 2022 were fly dates. So I thought to myself back then, do I want to paint myself into a corner of starting to use an amp and make a bunch of sounds on my pedal board, but then I'm going to have, these fly dates too, like all within a couple of weeks? Like, no, I want to use one rig, and I'm going to commit to trying to get this Quad Cortex to do what I want it to do, in the context of this gig. And this is going to be my Five for Fighting rig. Can I do it? And I set it up, took it to rehearsal. Everybody was happy. I was happy. Sounds good. I'm using one thing, you see in the rig rundown, I'm using cabinet on stage, rented Marshall in the case of this tour. In past tours, I've used a couple Sir 112s on stage, kind of spaced wide for a little bit of stereo. They're not mic'd. They're just for me on stage and just to get some vibe on stage, fill in the center of the stage, and to be able to get some feedback. Because I'm a big believer in, I don't like a totally quiet stage. I think that even if I'm using a modeler, I want a guitar cabinet up there making sound. Not a full range thing either. Maybe I would experiment with the new Tone X cabs because they're really good. I have to say, those new, the new full, FRFR one. Tried it. It's the first one I tried where I was like, okay, this is pretty damn convincing that I'm playing through a guitar cabinet. But the way I've been doing it works great. And the way I have the patches configured for Five for Fighting, it's set up for guitar speakers the way that I'm doing it now. And then also front of house feed, monitors, feed in-ears and stuff with speaker simulation. So it just works for this gig. So why change, Why make extra work for myself? And I, long story short, I love having cabinets on stage. They don't have to be loud. They're not super loud. Anybody that's seen us play will attest to the fact that, yeah, it's like not screaming guitar on stage, but it is loud enough to get some feedback and some vibe. Let's look through some of the other comments here. I wasn't going to address any other comments that weren't about this topic, but somebody's asking, have you tried the 78, 79 Brown sound by IK? Yes, I have, and they're great, and really impressed by those. So what else have we got here? Let's see. As long as you are able to work with what you get from rentals, yeah, you kind of have to be able to. So, like, for instance, give you another example right now. The guitars I have out here for acoustics right now, there's two Taylors that came out. One of them's kind of hard to play, but John actually loves it. He likes playing heavy strings and acoustic, John Andrazik. But the other one is easier for me to play, so I've been using that one. Man, is it ever a good sounding guitar. Great sounding Taylor 8 something series, 815, 817, something like that. It's one with the cutaway, the simple, volume-based treble preamp in it. I think it sounds great. And really good sounding acoustic. And I've been using it in both standard tuning and an alternate tuning for a song called Two Frogs. Tunes up beautifully and drop D with a raised B up to C second string for that song. Sounds just great. So another comment was on the YouTube video that I wanted to address. Why are you using the Quad Cortex only for your electric rig? And I'm using a Carl Martin acoustic gig for the acoustic line for the couple acoustic songs I'm playing. Why not just use the Quad Cortex? Great question. I actually originally tried to use the Quad Cortex in the context of this gig, but what's going on is I don't have a lot of output coming out of the quad into my wedges. I'm using wedges, not in-ears on this tour. Just a little bit of the electric guitar sound. And then the majority is going into the cab behind me. And it's kind of like, like a cabinet on stage, like an amp on stage sort of feel. That's the way that I've got my monitoring set up for my electric rig. Now, when I tried to go to an acoustic patch, now, of course, I'm not using the cabs behind me, right? The guitar cab, because it's just a DI acoustic sound. It required a much, much different level at the monitor desk to come out of those. And we're not doing scenes or anything like that on this tour, where different songs are different scenes. So I just thought, does that make sense? So the level going out of the the XLRs coming out of the quad cortex that are feeding front of house and also feeding the monitor desk, I've got that feed just going into my monitors just a little bit. So there's a little bit of, the IR sound coming out of those wedges that are in front of me. When I go to the acoustic, I need way more, because now I don't have a guitar cabinet behind me. It's just the DI sound. And it required a way different, like in the patch, I didn't have enough gain to gain up out of the quad cortex to get it up. It would require a different scene over at the monitor desk. And we're trying to keep things simple in monitor land and only have like one mix for the whole show. On some gigs you're on, Satriani, for example, every song's a different monitor. Like every song is a different scene. So you could have a way different level of any given thing you want on every single song, going song to song to song. It's almost like a stored preset for the whole monitor desk, right? For every song. We're not doing that on this tour. So it just became easier to have a separate acoustic line with a completely different level going into my monitor world, going to front of house and stuff. Not only that, the acoustic gig actually sounds great. And it's really a simple little unit. It's a copper colored pedal that I've got down there. It's got a DI out on it. It's got a built-in reverb, built-in simple parametric EQ that works great. I find there's a little too much 1K on this Taylor that I'm using, so I'm just dialing out a little bit of that. It's got a compressor in it with just a simple like compression overall knob and a level knob. I've got that set for a nice compression, because on some things I'm strumming real loud and on some things I'm finger picking. So I've got it set for just to compress the peaks when I'm strumming real loud. Feels great, sounds great. Front of house is happy with it. Level all makes sense. It just works for what I'm doing. A couple super chats that I got to catch there, so I'm going to do that. I saw one come in and that disappeared, so I'm going to catch that in just a second. Then there's another one up there right now. How did you get the Satriani gig? Was that a dream come true? Yes, total dream come true. And it was a Joe Satriani idea, where he contacted me kind of out of the blue and said, I've got a crazy idea. And we'd only DM'd a little bit, and I had met him once, but it almost doesn't count because I don't think he would remember. It was only very quickly back in 2009 where we briefly said hello. And I wasn't, in 2009, people probably didn't know me from Adam. I was playing with Chris Cornell, but I didn't have, the YouTube thing wasn't at the level it is now and all that. So I don't think he remembers me from then. But he just, he said he'd gone and listened to my record, Pete Dorn 2. And we had a meeting together, talked about music and guitar and everything for a couple hours, and it was a great vibe. And I guess he just decided, like, he made a leap of faith on me along with Steve, to just say, let's hope this, because it's not like we got together, to be honest, and jammed or anything like that. He's like, I've listened to your record. I know what you write like, I know what you play like, and I need a guy that plays rock like you. I think there was a certain intention in my playing or something that he liked, and he just trusted. And I love that guy, man. He's a lovely guy. He's a really, really intuitive guy. Great, obviously, legendary guitar player, writer. He's just also very seeing, knowing, intelligent, great decision maker. And when he makes decisions, they're for a good reason and stuff. And so I felt honored that he trusted me, and I told him that as well. Thanks for putting your trust in me. And towards the end of the tour, I really appreciate the vote of confidence, and that you were willing to because it could have worked out differently. Maybe I could have been a total hacker. I don't know. Anyways, okay. Let's see. Just looking through some of the comments here and stuff. What's this say here? Something about maybe bringing a guitar on in a gig bag, gate checking, that kind of thing. I'm not a big fan of gig bags, and I used to do that all the time. And then, occasionally, man, it got into a couple, it wasn't that often, but, occasionally you'd run into a gate agent that was like, yeah, you're going to have to check that. And it was in nothing but a bag. I can remember having a Gibson Chet Atkins on a tour once, and that was my main guitar. It was another tour kind of like this, where I was flying with a pedal board and one main guitar, and that was it. And kind of an acoustic tour that I was doing with Draco Rosa way long time ago. But it was my only guitar. It was a Chet, so it's like a Gibson with a tilt back headstock. It's basically almost like a Les Paul neck on that guitar. And the gate agent was really adamant about me checking it, and they were getting kind of nasty. And I was like, I cannot check this guitar. This is my livelihood. I've got to get when I get to Miami, wherever I think I was flying from somewhere to Miami, I said, I got a gig that day. Like, if you break this guitar, it's like, that's it. You know, I don't have any. And the guy was, I don't care. You know, he was like, you have to check it. And I was with Draco, and one of the other gate agents recognized him. He's very famous in, you know, kind of Latin music world. And he said, hey man, just let me take care of this, you know. And he brought both of us down the jetway and stuff together, but it almost ended up where I was going to have to gate check the guitar or something, and I didn't feel good about it, you know. And I just got tired of that stress. So what I did was I invested in some good hard shell cases, like SKB I series is kind of my preferred one. Gator also makes a really good equivalent, that are the big molded, you know, hard shells that, man, I sent SGs and, you know, Explorers and Les Pauls and all kinds of guitars in those I series cases. Never had a problem. I feel like you could throw them off a building and your guitar would probably be okay. You know, they're just made to be really durable. They're supposed to be waterproof, you know, like, you know, you could submerge them to a certain degree and no water would get in the seal. You know, there's a really, really good case. So I much prefer that than trying to carry a guitar on a plane these days. I'd rather just check it. Yeah. Okay. Question: flying on Delta, want to take a telly in a gig bag. Any issue with Delta wanting to check it? Well, you know, here's the reality. When I had the guitar that day, the check, of course, I got on the plane. Flight attendant's there by the door. She's like, "Oh, would you like me to put that in the closet for you?" You know, it's just one jerk 30 minutes earlier up at the counter that is insisting a certain thing, and then you get down the jetway and there's a completely different person that's totally willing to accommodate you. And I'm like, what, you don't like music or something? But you do, I guess, you know. Because there's always room for it's a 6-string guitar in a gig bag. It's an electric, you know, it's like a Chet. It was a, you know, thin body one. Of course there's room. It'll fit in the overhead, no problem, on any, you know, anything bigger than a 737 on up. Now, if you want to fly on Delta and you want to take a telly in a gig bag, are you doing a regional flight at all? That's inter, you know, like one of those American Eagle style where you're on the smaller jet plane, and nothing fits in the overhead, and you always have to. Generally speaking, on those planes, when you take something to the end of the jet bridge and you leave it there, I like to think that it's pretty safe in that situation. On those little regional, because they're taking a lot of bags. They're doing, you know, that's where you wait at the end of the jetway at the end. They bring your bag back that was tagged and everything. Seems generally pretty safe, but I still don't feel great about it. So it's you know, I would say probably 85, 90, maybe 95% of the time you'd be fine with your telly in a gig bag. And then one of these times you're going to get somebody that's like, no, you got to check that. You know, so I just don't want to deal with that anymore, and that's why I do the SKB I series, and I just check it as baggage, and never had a problem. Never had a problem with the I series, and that's a lot of flights and flying guitars all over the world. Yeah. The realities of touring. Okay, here's a super chat from DSL. Why would you ever subject your beloved personal gear to the ravages and dangers of touring if you don't have to? That's the voice of reason too, actually. Very, very interesting comment. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that don't want to bring their own stuff because they're like, why would I do? I mean, most bass players I know rental SVTs. They don't bring their, you know, if they've got an SVT or a B15, it's a studio amp, they keep it at home. They're like, why would I bring, you know, generally too, in the PA, 90% of the time, you know, there's no bass amp. It's always the DI. That's what the sound guys always want. It seems every now and then you know, mic on the amp. Your occasional sound guy might use that a little bit. Majority of the bands that I play in, they don't have anything to do with that mic on the bass amp because of bleed, and it's, you know, it sounds washy and just adds because of drums bleeding in and everything else. So they just take the DI anyway. So a bass amp on stage is generally for monitoring the bass and getting some feel on stage. That's it, you know, a lot of the time. So yeah, you're not going to bring your 810 and you're going to rent one, right? So Sean Hurley on this tour rented SVT, of course. And even tours where, like the past 5 for Fighting tours, where I've brought my own stuff, cabinets and, you know, wireless rack and all that other extra guitars and all that, Sean still has rented bass amps, rented SVTs. He can't be bothered in bringing, you know, he brings out a couple basses, pedal board, Noble's DI, that's what he brings. And for this very reason, why would you subject your beloved personal gear to the ravages and dangers of the road? Thank you for the super chat. And that is a excellent point. And the reality. Here's a good learn to fly, like Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. That is the reason. I mean, part of the reason why Iron Maiden, if you watch their Flight 666 movie, a lot of it is based on gear and the cost of the touring. And they figured out that they could bring their show to crazy places they'd never been before if they had their own plane and didn't have to pay for shipping everything and dealing with cartage and all that. If the whole band, the whole crew, and all the gear and everything was on one aircraft, the reality of touring was, becomes different. It's interesting, right? Yeah. Okay, what else have we got here? Let's see. How could it have been boring? Says Lauren. Somebody here. Here's one of the comments right here on my yawn, which is great. I mean, it's like somebody else asked, "I'm confused. Why no buffers? Is anyone using them?" Well, on this tour, I'm using a cable. I'm not using a wireless, but it's a great cordial, at 25, I think, foot cable that's really low capacitance, and it sounds really good. So it's like I don't need a buffer, because once I hit the quad cortex on my pedal board, I'm buffered. I'm digital by that point, basically, and that's it. So I don't need a buffer. It serves as the buffer, actually. So all right, let's take a look at some of these other comments here. To be honest, I expected to see a tremendous pedal board. Yeah, I mean, it might be what you expect from me, but no crazy Jose modded plexis, not on this one. Look, spectacularly uninteresting. Laugh out loud. Necessary, maybe. And okay, so there's the Tim Pierce, there's always a shred of truth, even in a comment like that. But it's not a bad comment. I mean, I think it might be kind of uninteresting. I know what you're talking about. Modelers, to me, are great tools. I love them. I'm going to use them every day. Kind of uninteresting compared to a big pedal board with all these different devices. Like, why did you choose that? Why did you choose that? And like, there's like a pedal boards are like snowflakes. No two are the same, right? Whereas a modeler, where everything's in one, and it's like, it is kind of uninteresting. When I see rigs, I guess I feel that way. When I watch a rig rundown that somebody's got, they've got a quad cortex or FM9, and that's it. Oh, well, that's kind of. It's sort of, even if the sound's good, right? It's like there's just something about it where we're gearheads and we like the analog stuff and all that. So why digital when you can mic and amp? Well, that's why. All the watch the whole previous how long have I been going? 42 minutes. Comes down to budget, and consistency is another big thing, right? I've made these sounds for this gig back in the majority of them with tweaks going along. I make little changes, but the majority of these sounds are the way that I configured them back in 2022. And with the quality of the captures that I made with this gig in mind back in 2022 of my then newly acquired old school King Royale top hat, it just works for this gig. It sounds great, and it's consistent to front of house every night. Now, if you want to watch, in 2023, I did a full rundown with audio of this rig, and nobody was complaining about the sounds back then. It's funny because I think a lot of people listen with their eyes and they see it and they go like, well, that's going to suck compared to an amp, but go and watch actually the video that I made in 2023. It's the same rig. Nothing really different about it, just some different guitars and stuff. And you can listen to the sound and tell me it doesn't sound good. It sounds good. And in the context also, you got to keep in mind the context of the music and this band. Because in Five Fighting, I'm window dressing. Yes, there's solos that are important, where standout parts and things like that I'm doing. This is a piano and acoustic guitar-based band where John is featured, in the style of Elton John, Billy Joel. That's Five for Fighting music. And a bit of, late 90s, early 2000s Americana kind of rock, that sort of thing. It's not Van Halen, so a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is textural and simple. I'm using quite a bit of effects, delay, some long reverbs. It's simple single note stuff sometimes where it's just tailing out for long. It's atmosphere around the piano, bass, drums, bass core sound of the band. great gig for a digital modeler, actually, is the reality. Keep in mind, I mean, also one more thing I'll just say, I played in front of 50,000 people in 2003 with Mandy Moore, pop artist, who was very big in the Philippines at the time. We went to the Philippines. We did one gig for 15,000 in an arena. We did another gig for 50,000 where she headlined a festival. I used the Podbean XT. Your man, Pete Thorne, Mr. Tube Amp aficionado, Podbean XT. Why? All these reasons. Budget, flying over. I would have had to backline an amp. I don't know what I'm going to get in the Philippines. What's that going to be like? Consistency, being able to plan my sounds in advance and fit in the context of Mandy Moore's pop music. My guitar was not the featured thing, right? It's little parts, sounds that are, integrated into the music, couple solos here and there, short things, no long improv solos, nothing like that. I'm a cog in the wheel of that music. So it's all dependent on the gig, and you get my drift. You get my drift. Okay, heading down through the comments and stuff here to the super chats that I missed, because thank you very much for those, and I gotta highlight those. I think you're almost always on in-ears. I'm not in this band, actually. Do you find you have to significantly change between even a mic'd amplifier and a modeler? Do you find you have to significantly change between even a mic'd amp and... Sort of don't understand the question, but do you mean like just kind of my approach or my mix? I mean, if you're on ears, it's like it's going to be extremely consistent night to night. I just, in this band, decided to use wedges because I can. I remember doing a show with Five for Fighting. It was at what is now the Crypto.com Arena or whatever the heck it's called. It used to be Staples Center in LA. It was newly opened back then, I think. And so it was a halftime at it might have been a Kings game or something. And Five for Fighting played, they rolled a stage out on the ice at halftime, and we played Superman and one other song, I think. I just remember then there were some issues with the monitors, and I was like, you know what? There was a bass amp, my top hat amp, and the drums, and John, and I realized I don't really need a monitor when the issues cropped up, right? It was like they're having issues. I was like, and I think I did the gig without having any sort of wedge or anything. I can hear the bass amp, I can hear the drums, and I know the song, so I can hear my guitar amp. That's almost like a garage band, right? I was like, I'm fine in this context of this gig with minimal monitoring. That was when it really became clear to me, was that hockey arena gig playing out on the ice in LA. So, with that in mind, I've always approached this gig like, if I almost any gig where I don't have to use in-ears for some reason, I won't, because I just enjoy it more. It's one less thing to worry about. If I could just walk out and pick up my guitar, I've got a little amp behind me, I can hear the kit. Maybe I've got a wedge and it's got some drums in there. I got a little bit of John's acoustic, a little bit of his vocals, a little piano, a little bit of bass guitar, nice little mix, my vocal, just a band mix. That's all I need. I don't, when the second I put things in here, I get way more critical about everything. I need more hi-hat. The tom, oh wow, the rack tom's really loud. Oh, oh, John, too much, too little of the vocal, whatever, my own guitar, up, down, like it just becomes this whole, I can't, I don't know why, but I'm just really, really picky and sensitive to levels. And I'm so much less tuned into all that when I'm just on a wedge, and I'm much more of a pleasant person probably to work with, because I need a lot more to be happy with an in-ear mix. I can get there, and then it's always that one extra. I got to get them 15 minutes before the gig and put them on and make sure the cable's not getting wrapped around this freaking chain or whatever, and get it, you know what I mean, and get it, okay, is it, and then is it plugged into the pack? It's only half plugged in, and then I put the pack on the belt, and then okay, now I got to get my guitar on and everything, and I hope I got the level set right on that. This is my mind when I'm using those things, it lends another layer of complexity to my gig that I wish I didn't have. Yeah. Okay. There's a couple other super chats there. What are your Taylor guitar settings? Bass treble volume, I generally leave the EQ at flat, so straight up and down. And then the volume I usually leave at about maybe 65 to 75% of the way up. So somewhere between like sort of like what would be 2 and 3 on the volume. Leaving myself a little bit of headroom if for some reason I find it's not loud enough in the monitor, and I'll just, even though front of house is going to get it too, it's like an emergency little bit of boost I can get there out of the volume. So that's usually what I do on the Taylor. And then at that point, I feel like I don't sort of believe in using the EQs on acoustic guitars that much. I kind of like to leave it as flat as possible and then let them do it at front of house, because invariably, like on a console, the EQ is going to be better than some little built-in preamp on an acoustic guitar. So I like to leave it pretty flat, have them iron it out. I am doing a little bit of EQ with the Carl Martin that I've got out here, where I found it was a little like just sort of a bit of a hunky mids at like 1K, and I just pulled that out like maybe 3 dB on the Carl Martin parametric EQ on the acoustic gig, and I showed it to the monitor guy. He's like, "Yeah, that's cool. That definitely sounds better." So I was like, "Okay, I'm just going to leave that in." A little bit of compression, a little bit of reverb, small little bit of EQ. We should address this as well. Just sad to hear about Brent Hines, of course, Mastodon. Yeah, it's really terrible. Feel terrible for folks that knew him, of course, and the Mastodon guys, and it's just a sad thing. It's a sad thing. So, saw him play once with them. Saw them live once. It was a stellar show. Really, really terrific. They're a force to be reckoned with, that band. Really great, and I'm glad I got to see them with him. But just a terrible thing. Motorcycles scare the hell out of me. It's like they're awesome and fun and stuff like that, but I've sort of made the decision to never ride one just myself, just because I can't see that good. And I feel like even the real decision for me when it comes to motorbikes was realizing that something like that can happen, like what happened to poor Brent. Chris Cornell got hit on a motorbike once and flew 20 feet up in the air and back down to the ground. He was sitting at a stoplight. He got hit from behind, I think, from somebody that wasn't paying attention, and that can happen. So when he told me that story, it just really solidified for me. It's like, man, you never know. Like, it's not you; it can be everyone. You could do everything right, and there can still be some other thing. But I guess that's life. And motorbikes are fun, and I get people that ride them and they want to do it. It's just that risk, that it's very tragic. It's very tragic. And I guess riding, maybe who's to say? It's a personal decision. Anyway, but we're getting off from. I feel terrible about that, but I do want to keep the chat directed, because this is sort of a targeted video about touring and stuff. So I'm going to come back to that now. But condolences to his family and people that knew him and that he was close to. Very sad thing. Braxall, hey man, what's up? So we met the other day. You came out and had your PT Custom, sir, signed, and you saw a little bit of sound check. I think John from Five for Fighting greeted me thinking I was someone else. I thought that too. Yeah, he had somebody else come in that day. Braxall came into the sound check, and I think he thought that you were another cat that was there that he'd never met until that day. He was the fella that sat in with us that night. So anyway, just you said you didn't know how to react. He realized that he made the mix up and stuff like that. But anyway, no harm, no foul. It was great to meet you and your wife. Nice folks. Thanks for driving all the way out, and thanks for getting my guitar as well. Nice to meet you guys. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I'm gonna hang another few minutes, guys, and then I gotta go get. It's always glamour out here. I gotta go get my laundry out of the dryer here. Day off, laundry day. Had to do one more load of laundry today, and then I'm good to get home through the end of the tour. So, Joe says, "I love for fighting. I'm a piano player and songwriter, but I know you get more exposure with your shredding skills at Satch Vi." Yeah, but I love doing different kinds of gigs. Of course, Satch Vi is my dream come true, sort of. But we have a lot of fun playing with Five for Fighting too. It's another fun opportunity for me to play. I really like working for John. He's a terrific, we're friends, but he's also my boss out here. And he's always been a great guy to work for, because he's just so straightforward, and he's a great songwriter, and we get along great. The tour is always kind of like summer camp and just fun, very low stress. It's a nice show, and that's it. So, I like to keep busy, do different things, and this keeps me doing that. Seeing Oasis, I actually am, as long as I didn't get scammed on tickets. I bought tickets from a thing that I'm questioning whether or not it was a good decision. You know, it's one of those like aftermarket seller things. I'm supposed to get the tickets the day of the show. Is that going to work out, or am I going to be out my money? Watch this space. We'll see. Hopefully it works out. Is there savings by using modelers instead of amps and other gear? And who are the savings being passed on to? How is the show improved? Not trying to be a smartass, but seriously curious. Well, the savings is always in weight and freight, complexity of having to bring stuff. Because I can fly. Here's the reality. I can fly with my quad cortex in a backpack and a guitar and a suitcase, and I can check that stuff. And it sounds pretty much the same, you know, out front in the PA as when, like, even if I didn't have the cab on stage. If you were sitting back in the 20th row of the venue and you were listening to the band through the PA, it would be the same sound basically through the PA as if I was up there with, you know, even when I use the cab rig on stage and stuff, which is really gets my yayas, you know, helps me get my yayas out, right? Do you know what I'm saying? So like if I cart gear from LA and I bring a bunch of cabinets and all this different stuff, or if I can fly out from LA with one guitar and a thing in my backpack and plug that into the PA, the sound is basically the same one way or the other. Because none of when I use cabinets on stage, like the rented Marshall cabinet that was in the video put out a couple days ago, that's not mic'd or anything. I'm getting feedback out of it, which adds to the performance. Yeah, I think so. And it also fills in the front of the stage a little bit for people that are like, you know, underneath the PA, because PAs are flowing so high these days and wide that I feel like if you've got a real bass amp on stage, the drums, and a guitar amp, it's at least filling in the music in the middle a little bit, and you're not just listening to this sound of the PA that's way out here and up high, right? The big line array PAs. So the way it's not about the show being improved as much as it is about the cost and the budget realities of today's touring. You know, if you just sort of tuned in, you missed my diatribe at the beginning about how at the beginning of this tour, it was only about a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks before we left on this tour that we got a text from the tour manager saying, guys, it's going to be really expensive to truck gear from LA all the way to Ohio for the first gig on this tour. We would save money and it would just make a lot more sense for the tour if we can rent gear out of Nashville. So we're going to backline the gear. That was the hand that I was dealt, right? And it, you know, at the end of the day, I don't really think that you would hear that much of a difference up front if we had carted my gear from LA and brought it all the way to Ohio, or if we did what we're doing now. Would the show sound different? I don't think so. Not with this band, the way that we've been touring, at least not for the last 4 or 5 years. The show is set up so much that we can do a fly date or we can bring our own stuff. It basically sounds the same, which is pretty good, right? I mean, it's a consistent thing. That's good. Now, if I was to go out and do, I've done a lot of classic rock show gigs where I'm using, by the way, at this point, the rented stuff as well, like the quad cortex and, you know, I fly with a couple guitars and that's it. There'll be a cab when I get there. I might bring a Seymour Duncan Power Stage, or on this tour, I'm using these orange pedal babies. We can talk about that too if you want in a sec here. But is it as good of a show for classic rock show? It's great musicians. We play the songs great. We've got a great front of house guy. It's not quite the same in that band, you know. That's my honest feel, is that when we use our rigs, I mean, James brings a 72 Marshall and I've got my 2 412s and 2 PT100s, and, you know, Tim's got his own drums, and, you know, our onstage sound is pretty, if there's some folks out there that have seen classic rock show in the UK, it's pretty kick-ass. So, which is, you know, I believe for that particular band, just like I believe for Satch Vi, it's not the kind of gig where, you know, it's a guitar-centric sound. It's very guitar, hard rock to hard rock focused, you know, and it's like guitar and amps and proper. It's a thing that, you know what I mean? For that gig, it's just, is it as good at, so I'm going to answer ultimately, like, how is the show improved? Well, with classic rock show, it's definitely better when we use the real amps. It's still a great show with the other stuff, better with the real amps and cabs. Fight for Fighting, I think it's a a bit of a wash for that particular kind of music. Hopefully that makes sense. Like why, you know? Let's see here. What else we got here? How do you set up your wedge monitor mix generally? Like a mix. I want to hear everybody. We have been playing mini shows, and man, they vary so much. It's just wild. How do you do it and communicate your needs to the sound person? Well, it's really helpful if you can go one person at a time. So, for instance, start with the drums. Have the sound person put the drums in your wedge. Identify any problems right out of the gate, and go person to person to person. So, in other words, let's start with drums. Drummer, can you just play a basic beat, go around the kit? They do that for about 20 seconds as the person's adding in the, mainly kick and snare, hi-hat, a little bit of toms, right? You don't generally need as much toms, maybe a little bit of overheads, but go easy on the overheads. And you get it to the point where, okay, that sounds great. What, you okay in guitar land? Yeah. Okay, go to the next person, bass player, the drummer themselves. Of course, they need to hear the drums properly, and just make sure you go all the way around and have them go all the way around the kit, because sometimes they've got like the rack tom just nailing you, that happens, right? And it's like, why are you gonna, that one tom is like killing me, oh, sorry, and they even it out. But you do that and then say, okay, what else do you want? Well, how's the bass? Well, maybe you don't need bass, depending on the subs at the gig and depending on, the sound of the house and stuff, but maybe you do. So have them put a little bit in there just for articulation so you can hear the clarity of it. You just go each person at a time then. How's that for bass for everybody? Okay, play some guitar. Okay, how are you, guitar player? And go, give me a little more, a little less, And I always tell people, because generally it's a good thing to tell them, small moves. No, don't make big moves. Sometimes it's like 6 dB up and down with, when you say, give me a little guitar, 6 dB up. No. It's like, just go gently, a couple dB every time, maybe 2 dB at a time. How's that? A little more. I'd rather say, no, still keep going, than say, oh my God, you just blew my head off, And you go once again, one person at a time. Okay, how's the guitar for the bass player now? You need any guitar? No, I don't even want to hear him. I hate him, No, you know what I mean. And you do that, and you just so generally speaking, when it's wild and it's out of control and it varies gig to gig and there's problems, it's because you're not doing a controlled sound check like that and identifying problems, or maybe there's like a ringing tom that's feeding back through the whole, mix or something. It was like when we first got out on our first gig, the snare drum for some reason was really like there was this 400 or something hertz ring coming off every snare hit, and I'm like, we got to get a handle on that. Can we control that? That was the first thing when Randy started playing the drums right out of the gate, and it was like, is there a way we can get put a lid on that a little bit, because it was driving me crazy. But okay, here's a comment here that I'm just going to read real quick. Not trying to question your choice, Pete, but was wondering if you have tried the FM3 or FM9 live. I get it if you really need the captured tone, which is why I like my captures and we use Quad Cortex, but you should be able to find the amp or easily tweak in the tone you need. Cortex actually isn't the preferred modeler. Well, it is for me. I don't really care about like popular assessment or things like that, and I don't really agree. I mean, I think the Quad Cortex is quite popular these days. But thanks for the video. He was nice about it. So that was Andy. Definitely, I mean, FM3, FM9, great. These are all terrific tools. Matter of fact, I'm using the VP4 on a new pedal board. This one that I think I'm going to end up bringing to Japan as my main post effects unit and doing the stereo splits and stuff. So the VP4 is going to get integrated pretty soon here, and that's for another video. But yeah, man, it's whatever works. I like the workflow with the Quad Cortex. I get more lost on an Axe-Fx. Nothing dissing them. Axe-Fx is legendary at this point. They're a big player in this world, and there's a lot of people that use them and love them. In Classic Rock Show, that's what James uses. It's his 4-cable whole thing with a vintage Marshall, right? He's got an Axe-Fx up there that he's using, for all of his effects. And then when he flies, he uses FM9. So there you go. In a band that I play on, there's another fella using one, but I'm just more comfortable personally on the Quad. Yeah, and that's it. I'll be using the VP4 soon, so I could make the FM3 or FM9 work. I know I could, but it's just I've just gotten into the way that the Quad works for me. So somebody also says, now I want to hear it. in this comment right here. So you can basically check out the 2023 rig rundown. It's like 5 for Fighting, Pete Thorne, rig rundown. You'll see one from 2023 and you can hear it on there. So quite a small rig. Thanks for showing there's no need for 50 guitars to have a pro sound. That's the other reality of bringing one guitar, and why my rig rundown is probably kind of boring on this one, because it's like, yeah, it is one guitar, but that's that Blue PT HH standard that I use on this gig. Super versatile with all of the switching. It's just a lovely sounding guitar, and I can get a million tones out of that one guitar. I don't really need a ton of guitars, So here's a great one. For a guy that gives such incredible gear reviews, this is truly disappointing. I'm sorry, man. Sometimes, it's just a reality. It's not like a show and tell. Look at all this stuff I've got. It's like, here's the reality of what I'm using on this tour in order to get the job done, man. So this is kind of funny. But it's a good question. Sweet rig. Are the vocals monitored through the wedges and the guitar through the amps and cab? So mainly I've got the guitar in the guitar cabinet, but I have a little bit in the wedge. And then, yes, I've got my vocal quite loud in the wedge, and everyone else's vocal at a lesser amount in my wedge. Certainly there's a good amount of lead vocal in there, though. Yeah. Anything else here that I don't know. I think that just about covers it. But I'm going to go down to the bottom of the chat right now. I know I haven't addressed like a ton of the comments on the, but I wanted to hit these ones on the video, mainly. But let me hit these super chats here, and then if anybody else has got anything else they'd really like to know, ask it one more time, and I'll address the ones right at the bottom of the comments that you're typing right now. Yeah. There's Tim. Thanks for the super chat, dude. Say, I think back to being 16 and 86 and practicing in my bedroom, dreaming of just getting Satch's autograph. I know, man. I saw him in 1990 on the Flying in a Blue Dream tour, and he blew my mind. At Stu Ham, Jonathan Mover up there at the convention center in Edmonton. And, to be playing with him all those years later, it was never lost on me. I'd be standing there looking at him going, there he is. He's right there, You're playing his songs. It's some of the same songs, from Flying in a Blue Dream to Satch Boogie, at the end, it was nice of Joe to let me lock up on the riff with him. I would double the riff with him the last time through after the bridge and the tapping part. And what a thrill, man. Because I have a picture of myself in my high school yearbook from, I think it's from 87 or 88, of me playing a lunchtime concert at my school. And I'm playing Satch Boogie in that picture. So it's a very, very full circle, thing for me. And it's just, I can't thank those guys enough for having me out, honestly. I hope I hit all the super chats. I think I did. If I missed one, I'm really sorry. Yeah. Braxel says, I know when I met Pete, it was like I've known already, I guess, from all these many years of watching his streams. It's the same way I feel when I meet people from YouTube that I haven't met before, like Paul Davids and, Rick Beato and folks like that. It's like, yeah, I feel like I know you already. It's kind of cool. So it's a nice thing about YouTube is a very sort of, it's just real and disarming, especially if it's this style of video that you're used to seeing me on, like live streams. This is it, man. I'm not really any different in person. So, yeah. Using the same backline gear every night with this tour. Yeah, so all the gear was, here's what happened. Think about the efficiency of this. The bus drove out of, I believe, Alabama, because I think that's where Senator is. So it'd be, I don't quote me on this, I think it's probably 5-6 hours from Nashville, something like that. You drive up north, go through Nashville with a trailer, pick up gear at SIR, continue on to Ohio, which isn't really that far. So the efficiency of that, as opposed to trucking gear all the way from Los Angeles through the Rockies and everything all the way to Ohio, or sending the bus from Alabama, although we wouldn't do this would never be efficient, but all the way to California and then pick up the equipment in the trailer and drive all the way to Ohio. You'd never do that, right? So yeah, it was most efficient. It was determined the most efficient sort of cost-effective way was rent the gear out of SIR in Nashville that we needed. And, Alabama, Nashville, Ohio with that gear. Now the bus will go from Seattle at the end of the tour. It's got to get back to home base in Alabama. So he's got to drive all the way across the country. He'll just cut back down through Nashville, I will assume, and drop the gear at SIR and finish the drive back to where the tour bus originated. That's it. The realities of touring. This is how it's done. Alan Holdsworth rented gear all the time. Sure, because at that level, it's like, I mean, it's what do you do? Marco Mendoza, bass player from Satriani, he's doing a whole European swing right now. Rented stuff. They've got, he's got a couple basses that he's got out, and that's it. They're using local stuff everywhere he goes. It's not efficient. They're in a van, driving around. So Alan Holdsworth rented gear all the time. He traveled with his headless guitar, even smaller than it, right? And Magic stomps and uses Randall amps. Please tell me if you sound better. Nobody sounds better than Alan Holdsworth, so I don't know. I don't think so. It's all in his hands. That's the other thing, is that it's the person. At the end of the day, if you're, you could hand somebody a rented Fender Strat and a PV amp or whatever, and I should be able to get through a Five for Fighting show and play a show where it's decently good. You know what I mean? A couple effects. Give me a Boss delay and a chorus pedal or something, and I'll make it work and play the songs, and hopefully you'll have a good time. I don't know. I mean, that's the world, that's the reality. So I think, yeah. I imagine getting clean clothes and shower can be rough on the road. I know I did when I went out with a band in the 80s. It was not easy being with some people in a van. Yeah, I mean, when you get to a venue and it's got a nice shower situation, maybe a couple showers and a couple separate dressing rooms, you're like, great, all I can ask for, I kind of have gotten into the type of touring where, if it's a good venue with a good shower and I don't really need a hotel. I mean, if I'm sleeping on a bus, get up and go in there, get my day started, and then I can go out and run around the town until sound check and find coffee and do all the stuff I like to do, and it's all good. So yeah. Dennis says CRS is in your face. I know, I sat front row. That's the idea, man. I mean, I was always like, I told James at the beginning, and he was very receptive to this, and he's been a terrific partner in, because he's got to kind of balance things too, the music and everything. But I was like, I don't really want to do this if it's a simulated rock show. If it's a Vegas casino version of you know what I mean? Like, nothing against people that play in Vegas casinos, but that's not the kind of show I want to do. If we're selling a ticket based on this is a classic rock experience, you're going to come to it and it's going to remind you of what it was like to go to those shows. I was like, let's get as close to that as possible, because those people, if we do that for them, are going to be all about it. They're going to be like, oh my God, that is what it reminds me of, And I remember the first time we did the US run, we've only done one US run since I've been with them, but a few years back, 2023, I guess, tour through the US. I remember a guy coming up to me in Detroit and going, man, that was like going to 8 concerts in one. Because we played, Boston, and we did Queen, and we did this and we did that, and we do them good, man. We do the songs good. The singers are great. We do it justice. We play the right guitar tones, and we do it with a lot of love and passion, and like, not like cover band, nothing wrong with being a cover band. We're a cover band, but we do it with, we're a cover band, but we love this stuff. Like, we're really passionate about it. We want it to be like, we want to, you know what I mean? Like, the spirit's there. Let's celebrate this music and have a great time, and that's kind of the intention. So Chris says, does Satriani use modelers or real amps? Real amps. So 2 PT100s for me, 2 412s. Steve is Synergy, Fryat power amps, and 2 third power cabinets that were custom ones that he had made. So he's got 100 watts up there, stereo. He uses an Axe effects for all of his delay and stuff like that, though. So it's in the loop of the, maybe it's in between the preamp and the power amp, or it's in the effect loop of the Synergy preamp. I'm just not sure, but it's Axe effects nonetheless for his effects only, but it's all tube, the origin of the guitar tone. And Joe, third power Dragon amp that he helped design with third power. He's got a couple of them up there, and very simple rig other than that. Simple delay, wah, very straightforward rig other than that. But all tubes, all cabs, we were loud, proud tube amps. Yeah. Yep. All right. I think I should go, guys. That's it. We're about an hour and 13. I think I got to figure out what's going on here for dinner in a minute. I'm gonna go with Randy, the drummer, out for some food. But I feel like that was a good explanation of why, on different gigs you do the things you do. In summary, it really all comes down to how many gigs, budget, what makes sense. You can't go losing money out here, or there's no point being out at all, right? So it's gotta make sense. And sometimes it's just, it doesn't make sense if you spend all the money in the world getting your gear to and from places. But sometimes when it's deemed to be a part of the, Sats 5 band, classical rock show are good examples, is deemed to be a big part of the show, and it's what we want to use. I mean, ultimately, me as an old school rock guitar player, yeah, at the end of the day, do I want to do that? Yeah, I want to do that. So if I can, I'll always bring my stuff and rock out the real cabs, the real tube amps and stuff like that. If it makes sense, I'll have a whole slew of guitars out there in my guitar vault full of 10 guitars and anything I want to grab, I mean, that's the ultimate. It's just if it makes sense or not. And it's always dictated by if the tour is long enough. If there's 35 shows, it makes a big difference than when there's 8. There's a lot more money coming in once you're out there and the whole thing's running. I remember Chris Cornell saying to me, this is like just a little aside, but he was doing the Temple of the Dog tour back in just before he passed away, the year before he passed away. He called me up and I was in Marseille, France. And he said, "You want to come to the show tonight?" I was like, "I'm in France. I would love to come," And he was like, "Well, I guess that means no." And I felt so bad, but he was so kind. He's such a sweet guy. He phoned me up and asked me if I want to go the day of the show in LA. They were playing the Forum, I believe, that night. And I said, "How's it going? How's that?" Because I hadn't talked to him for a minute. And he said, "Man, it's great." He said, "But, we geared up so much to do this thing." He said, "And we only are doing 7 shows when they did Temple of the Dog." He said, "Once you're all geared up," he goes, "it actually costs the same, to get everything together and the production and rehearsals and get everybody out there. So we should have booked more dates, should have done 15 or 20 or something instead of 7, I think he was trying to say, because once you get it all kicked into gear, and that's the reality of it, is that, if it's a month or longer, 2 months, once you're in the flow and you can book enough shows back to back to back to back to back to back to back, then it becomes more financially viable, of course, when you've got more of that money coming in every day from the shows and the guarantees and the merch and everything else to feed into. Now we can add to the tour, we can bring more production, we can do more stuff, and it makes more sense, to go all out. All right, hope that makes sense. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it. And I'm gonna do Sunday Live in a couple days. That'll be, it's Thursday, so I'll do Sunday Live from our last gig day in Spokane, Washington, I think, and I'll be flying home the following day after that. So come to watch me for Sunday Live if you have time, if you have the interest, if you want to be there. If you don't find me, what was it, boring or whatever somebody said in the comments. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Hit the thumbs up, and everybody have a great rest of your evening or morning, wherever the heck you are, whatever you're doing. I'll see you Sunday, hopefully. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your great super chats and your great questions and all that good stuff. Appreciate you all. Take care, everybody. See ya.